How you doing, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, it's Good Friday, and since much of my business world is probably closed, I may untether myself from the desk for the day. Not that there's much of anything to do. I might drive out to West Milford to pick up coffee beans from Greenwood Lake Roasters, maybe get curbside pickup from the new barbecue joint in that town. There isn't a whole lot to do, obviously, but maybe getting out for a drive would be good. They closed the state and county parks here in New Jersey a few days ago because too many people were congregating at some of them, so I can't go up to Ramapo Lake or Wawayanda for an impromptu hike. And I probably should drive because I think I've done more miles running than driving in the past week plus. Yesterday I managed to get in the longest run I've done since my comeback in February, 7.25 miles, which left me feeling great all day long. That seems to have carried over to today. I'm still riding that kind of endorphin high, so I'm going to keep that going as long as I can. In other words, sorry, the news is a little banal or surface oriented. That's just where I am this morning. We're all trying to make our way through. So let's get to today's guest. Jennifer Hayden is joining me from Central New Jersey this time around. Jennifer is the cartoonist behind the amazing graphic memoir, The Story of My Tits, published by Top Shelf, which covers not just her breast cancer experience, but her lifelong relationship with her boobs, and of course becomes a all-encompassing, encompassing up to that point memoir about her life. We recorded a live conversation about the book and her midlife move into comics making a few years ago at Labyrinth Books in Princeton, along with her friend Summer Pierre, who I should record with sometime in the next couple of weeks. But Jennifer and I have never recorded one-on-one. We always shoot the breeze at comic shows, and I always have a good time sitting down with her husband during Small Press Expo down in Bethesda every year. We always get together during breakfast because we're the only two people who get up early. So anyway, I was really looking forward to catching up with her and spending a little time. Now, as caveats go, she was using her computer's internal mic, so it sounds a little metallic, but sound quality is just fine. Otherwise, nothing to note. Here's me and Jennifer. Anyway, we're here, and that's what counts.
Yeah.
So how are you coping? How are things going for you?
Well, it's an emotional time for sure, and I waver between reading horrible stuff and freaking out, and then shutting everything out and just focusing on reading books and getting work done, and fooling around with my husband and daughter, who are both in the house waiting it out with me. So it seems like you never get the sweet spot in between. You sort of vacillate between them.
Did it take you a while to find that sort of equilibrium, which I know is not a full equilibrium, but, did you find yourself early on just kind of tipping into the refreshing numbers all the time thing?
No, I found that at the beginning, I really was very able to block this out. And I started quarantine a month ago. I started about a week before everybody else because I could and realized I should, and that this was what was going to happen. So I'm about a week ahead of most of my, friends and family. And I just got really demolished like a week ago. And, the beginning of this week, and just felt like I was bleak. I just couldn't smile and I couldn't participate. And my husband and my daughter were cleaning the house and absolutely in hysterical laughter over stuff. And I just was like, shut up. This is horrible. And then a day later, I kind of bobbed up and realized there's nothing you can do. And you're just going to have to, give the New York Times and, whatever else you read, give it a half an hour and then shut it down and get back to work. And the next day, my daughter's walking around with this look in her face like she can't take it anymore. And she said, I'm right where you were yesterday, Mom.
That's contagious too. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, everybody has to run their course. And the really hard part when you're living with people is I try to keep a lid on things for the people I live with. And I have realized that I can't do that because there's nowhere for me to let it off. I'm just going to have to allow myself to be horrible one day a week or an hour a day and let this stuff come through me and come out, which as a WASP, I'm not good at, but I'm learning. I really am. Yeah.
Is there a sense though that realizing that everybody else in the household has the same predicament? Or do you feel the mother of the household's pressure on top of, your waspiness?
No, I don't. My daughter is her own grown-up person now. She's 23 or whatever it is, 24. And so I don't feel like I have to put on a front for anybody. But I do feel everyone's personality differences intensely right now on Facebook, when I'm talking to friends or Zooming with them, when I'm with my family. Everyone's personality is so much in relief right now. And I think we're all also finding our centers in the course of this. And we're what we have to cling to inside ourselves, that is our source of strength and really our core spiritually. And everyone's place is different. So, my husband is a doom and gloom guy, but right now he's feeling really vulnerable, and I have to. And, he doesn't want to talk about everything, which he usually does politically. And so I've got to respect that. I've got to realize that that's what he's got to do to hold his head together. And I've got to do my thing. And my kid has to do her thing. And she's laughing hysterically watching like makeup videos, and I want to slaughter her, but that's her bag, man. That's how she's going to get through this. So it's, I'm very much feeling my limits, and it's almost a great feeling, I have to say, because I'm realizing what my resources are and what they aren't.
Mm-hmm. Do you find you mentioned the Facebook connections, do you find you're more in touch with friends, maybe not necessarily through Facebook, than you were going into this? Have you been reaching out to people, or have they been reaching out to you?
A little bit. I'm a pretty isolated person anyway. I'm easily distractible, so I get much more productive when I'm not in touch with everybody all the time. And I have a lot of friends who don't want to spend all day on the phone. They can't stand that. So I have been, I Zoomed with, my buddies Ellen Linder and Summer Pierre and Glynis Fox and I, when we couldn't table at Mocha, we got together in a Zoom fake Mocha, and all talked about what we were up to and what we were doing, and that felt really good.
I should have come by and talked to the three of you and not talk to Ellen, as I do every single time. Until now, that Ellen and I have actually become acquaintances and pals through the memorial that I held for Tom. Until then, she and I had never actually spoken, despite all the time I would talk to the three of you. So I feel like less of a heel. But
Oh, that's funny. But the thing I do notice, interestingly, though, is that I'm having to be very gentle with people. And I tend to have a kind of rough and tumble sense of humor. And I tease people. I grew up in New York. I'm kind of a hard, shell person in some ways. But I find on Facebook and everywhere else that I'm having to be softer and realize that it's like the whole world is sick, even whether they have this or not. And everybody, you have to be, I have felt from the beginning that there's this incredible need for healing everybody. All these sick people, all these people affected by the illness, all these hugely stressed out people. But I find that like on Facebook, I'm not making jokes about things the way I would. And other people might make a joke, but it sounds too harsh. And then they'll apologize and say, I haven't really got my feet yet in this new world. And it's really interesting. It's as if our humanity is becoming the foremost thing about each other
Yeah.
that we have to cope with.
I think there is that sort of read the room vibe where sometimes I'll start to type something and have second thoughts. Not that it's necessarily trying to be funny or flip, but just, this isn't exactly the environment where I need to make that comment. It's the sort of thing like Amy and I will share comments or jokes or whatever that we know we would never say in public because it's just not the right time, et cetera. And in fact, is one of the things I miss about Tom, because Spurgeon and I would be the people who could write to each other with things that we would love to say, but would never actually, make a joke about in public. So,
yeah,
it's a weird trip.
He's sorely missed. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned working. What are you, do you have a project that's a specific project you're working on right now, or is it a broader comment? What are you working on, I guess?
I do have something I'm working on, and this whole quarantine is really affecting it in a certain way. After my big book came out, I started working on a book for Top Shelf that was an anti-cookbook, and it was I'm halfway through it, and it was a very challenging project because it was my first in full color, so I was painting everything. But anyway, it was half done. I took a trip to France to go to the Comics Festival in Angoulême, and I had this unbelievable adventure unfold. And I came home and said, I have to commit this to paper. I just have to tell this story. And I started to draw the adventure, but as I started it, it was supposed to be 40 pages. It's now 80 pages. And what I realized in the course of it was that I had all this stuff to unpack about my relationship with France, my relationship growing up with European comics, their influence on me, the previous terrible experiences that I'd had going to France. I wasn't imagining it. All kinds of disasters had happened. So I had to sort of fill in all of this backstory, and then started to get into all this stuff about like Hemingway and Patti Smith, and realized, oh, this is a whole like cultural exploration that I've been wanting to do. So I thought I had it. I thought it was starting to get finished, and I just this morning actually I ripped a piece of paper off the wall that was all the page numbers that I thought would lead to it being finished at about like page 120 or something. And I just said, this is getting longer and longer, and you have to give it air. And you know what? I don't even have a publisher for this. I mean, Top Shelf might take it, but somebody else, I don't know who will want this. This is a labor of love, and it needs all the air that it needs to breathe. And so I've decided not to give it any kind of a deadline or any kind of a page limit, but I work on it every single day. And by the end of quarantine, which I expect to last a good long time, I mean, I think we might be quarantined for a year, because I don't see in all the scenarios of starting to let up on this how it's really safe until there's a
treatment or a vaccine.
Yeah. There is no real, even if they lifted restrictions, we'd be crazy to do much different than we're doing until there's a vaccine. So
there's your assumption that people aren't crazy.
I know, and there are people who will be so restless that they will come out. But I mean, anyway, so that's every day I'm at work on a project that will end up being a graphic travel novella called Le Chat Noir, the Black Cat, and I'm loving it. But it's and it's keeping me sane. It really is. Yeah.
As this sort of project is doing for me, as sane gets for me, but I figured this is my demented art form. But do you have any friends or family who've tested positive for this thing so far, or have gone through the whole cycle?
A good question. No, but on Facebook, I'm friends with one or two people who have gone through it, and they've been fine. They've done it at home. None of them have been hospitalized. They're all my age, without underlying conditions, and each of them has, had flu symptoms, lost a sense of taste and smell for a while, but after a week or so, they're over it. But and family's fine. I just heard from my aunt who's 80 something, and she's in a nursing home where there was one case, and so assisted living. So they sort of locked everybody up and are letting them out for walks, which is good because my aunt's very active and she's bouncing off the walls with boredom. But she has to take her meals in her room. So, but I haven't lost anyone, and I don't. Just yesterday, actually, again on Facebook, which we now totally rely on for news. I saw that an old friend of mine is working in a hospital, so now I'm worried about her. She was just, saying, everybody, listen, take this as seriously as possible. You wouldn't believe what's going on,
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yeah, I had one guest who had gotten her positive test that day, and we recorded that evening. And in the week and a half since, seeing her little Instagram stories on when she's able to post, when she's functional for 5 minutes at a time, it's pretty harrowing to imagine. And under 40, this person, but just getting walloped.
So is she hospitalized? How is she?
No, she's managed to get through this without going to the hospital. Now, she had all sorts of crazy health issues previously. Her name's Eva Hagberg, if you want to check out the conversation we had the night she got her news. But since then, it's been, barely able to get out of bed, hardly functioning, etc. But at least going to the hospital is the last ditch thing, that fear that's where the concentration of disease is, and that's where it can get a lot worse. So I'm convinced that's a reason why it's more fatal for men than women, because guys will keep saying, I'm fine. And then it's, it gets worse and worse until they're not treatable. But that's just
actually it's the women. No, the stereotype actually is the opposite. I have found it's that the women have such a high tolerance for pain, which is built in for childbirth and cramps and stuff like that, that they tend not to complain until the last minute. It's usually the doctors who aren't respecting the women, aren't believing them when they complain, because they aren't used to women complaining, and they think that women are exaggerating, and they listen to the men. I think men are more likely to complain, which in some cases is good. I think a woman will have a heart attack, not know it, die, and a guy will be, screaming from the beginning, and he'll get help. I think there's something really weird about this this virus. I was just reading some stuff about it, and literally there's something in the architecture of the virus that makes it easier for it to attack men than for it to attack women. Something about the extra chromosome and ways that, things that we have built in that the women have that makes them. I don't know.
Men tend not to wash their hands after the bathroom too. So I'm kidding. These are all bad, stereotype jokes about guys. But let me ask you also mentioned being able to get back to reading and not reading just news all the time. What are you, comics, prose? What are you spending your time with in terms of reading?
I'm a very weird reader. I just ordered 2 books, and I'm actually waiting. I'm going to give them 3 days. I bought them from the bookstore in town, and the lady's great, and I dropped off a check, and she left them in a bag for me, but I'm letting them cool for 3 days.
We have a garage where we decontaminate everything. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So I'll let them sit. And one of them is called If Women Rose Rooted. And I'm reading another book by the same author called, Jailbreaking the Goddess. A great title. And it's somewhat stupid and somewhat terrific in that it's talking about the different faces of the goddess, the feminine divine, and there's usually the 3 faces. So there's the mother, maiden mother, and crone, represented by the full moon and the waning and waxing crescents. But she's trying to put forth the idea that there may be 2 more faces that aren't dependent on the reproductive cycle of women, and one would be a power, sort of a power representation, and the other would be a creative representation. And we draw on those two throughout our lives, and the others as well. And it's an interesting. I'm interested more and more as I age in reading kind of the philosophy of feminism and being in a woman's body and worshiping a feminine divine energy. And so I'm pretty woo woo in my reading. And I, of course, also got myself Gabrielle Bell's new book, Inappropriate. I can't wait to read that. But I've been in a reading slump, and that sometimes happens when I'm depressed and worried, and I get sucked into the internet too much and start to read the newspaper, which is not usually what I'm doing. I usually totally ignore the paper and wait for my husband to tell me that the sky is falling. But in times like this, I have to read for myself. So I had a lot of things I was reading that were just, they were just dull. They were on my reading pile. But I have some other things I want to get into too. I discovered a Jewish comic that is so funny that I hadn't heard of before, called Shalom Man. I forget about.
I think I saw it back in like I feel like it's in the 80s or 90s. Yeah,
old.
Yeah.
And I discovered it at the Jewish Museum in Philadelphia, and in the gift shop. I was like, what are comics doing this gift shop of like heavy and also beautiful things, and this little spinner rack of comics. So I have a pile of those I bought a while ago that I can't wait to dig into. Yeah.
Awesome. And assuming we still have a world ahead of us, any comics or books you're looking forward to? Are there things that were supposed to come out later this year that you're thinking, oh yeah, I can't wait for that to come?
Well, it's Laura Lee Gullidge just published a book called the something rather of Mona Star. Oh God, I forgot the title. Anyway, she is a wonderful YA author, and that is a great book about depression and anxiety, very on the mark for right now. And trying to think of other stuff that's coming out. Now, I'm really not plugged in right now. I'm sure there are things that's skipping my mind. The thing I want to say is, I feel so bad for people who've had to cancel their book tours. And all of these shows have gotten canceled and are probably going to be canceled. I'm assuming SDCC is not going to happen. I'm assuming even SPX might have to be canceled in September. And I'm really hoping that all these people, that we find some kind of venue on the net where we can really celebrate these books. I know Laura Lee is running a Saturday morning Facebook Live Q&A series for like 6 weeks in a row to replace the events that were canceled about her book. I'm sorry, I can't right now think of the stuff that I'm looking forward to reading. I know there's
no worries. As long as you have some idea of the future, that's as long as there's something coming in future. But my last question, given your music and performing background, any music you're sort of binging on, or something that kind of gives you solace in this time? Do you find yourself replaying any sort of records again and again?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was playing some Stravinsky for myself to listen to the other night. It was very, very nice. And some, Vaughan Williams. But mostly when I'm working, I'm listening to tunes. And Bella Fleck, I think is his name. He's a banjo player. That was really fun to get into for a little while. And then, and then it's too much friggin' banjo. I'm terrible. I'm very faithless with music. It's, I want one of one thing and then one of something completely different and then one of something else. And then inevitably after like 6 months of making myself taste all these different flavors, I love, what's the name of the band? I'm With Her. It's like country, with female vocals, very, very beautiful. But then I'll get tired of that and end up drifting back into the 70s inevitably, and Joni Mitchell and, James Taylor
Yeah.
and
The standbys. Yeah.
and it's so comforting. It had been a while since I'd listened to them, and I was like, oh, thank you guys for still being there. This sucks. What are you guys up to? I hope you're still alive.
It's funny. I have a connection to Joni Mitchell. I should ask him if he's been in
Ooh.
touch with her, just to find out. And that's the fun part of this life that I've bizarrely built for myself. But yeah. I should hit that guy up and just see if there's not that I'd want to, or not that I could get her on to record, but just to know.
Well, I wonder how she is. I mean,
yeah.
Now you start worrying about all the fragile people who you know or who you idolize. I mean, John Prine.
Yeah.
Died, and I don't think it was coronavirus, or maybe was it?
It was complications. Yeah.
Okay.
It was respiratory complications from that.
But he was a lung cancer survivor, which is very rare. And only a few years ago he had survived it. So I mean, he had some serious, and he'd had some stuff before, other cancer before that, throat cancer, I think. So he'd had quite a health story, but I adore several of his songs, and I've been listening to more country because I want to hear fiddle playing, because that's my instrument, and I hope to get back to it. I haven't been able to play because of a pinched nerve in my neck, but I'm hoping to work through that. That's been that's been a big thing for me in all of this. I have scoliosis, which moves around, and then it pinches nerves, and then you get these neuropathies that really hurt. But you have to eventually, through muscular work and acupuncture and stuff, just get through them, get past them. And in order to draw, and also in order to play the fiddle, I have relied on body work, and I can't get any of it now. So it's been a month now, and the astounding thing is that I'm in less pain than ever. And I think it's because I finally have realized I have to do it myself, and I have to figure out how to do it myself and depend on myself. And everything I've learned over many years of working with people is, I'm figuring it out, and everything is so focused and centered and peaceful in the midst of this maelstrom right now that I'm able to benefit and finally put it to use. So, and that's good news, because I think it could be a year before I can work with any of these, people that I've used for years. And that's, for a lot of people, scary.
So I know it's weird, but as a closing note, it sounds like, I hate to say you're making the most of this experience, but it does sort of seem like you're at least, this is an opportunity for you to, like you said, find your center, find things that matter, and discover things like this, that you've actually integrated all of this knowledge.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think
terrible for everybody else, good for Jen. I'm
no, I definitely don't want to say that, because I think I was trying to write a Facebook post this morning, and ended up, I couldn't do it. I must have spent a half an hour and erased it. There was no way to write about a positive without making it sound disrespectful of all the negatives.
That's all I mean. Yeah.
Of all the negatives. But the positive I'm feeling is part of the negative, which is that, this is, a terrible, terrible moment that links us with all of history that's had to go through times like this, except they didn't do it the way we're doing it, and we're creating an economic collapse that is going to be a totally new experience, I think, because of our global economy. But the chance for us to find what is our essential selves, because so much has been taken away and we've sacrificed it, as if we survive this, I think we all may have, it's a little bit of the experience I had when I had breast cancer, where I felt as if all the crap had been burned off of me. Mm-hmm. And all that was left was what I could rely on and what I cared about. And I guess I'm kind of feeling that now, and it may be the age I am, 59, but I'm also feeling really tied to all the other human beings out there. And I'm feeling their screaming and their pain and all of that. And I think that compassion is something that we can all develop right now. If there's anything positive to come from this. Yeah.
That is a perfect note to leave off on. Jen, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. It's great to talk to you, Gil.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
That was Jennifer Hayden. Go check out her graphic memoir, The Story of My Tits, published by Top Shelf. Jennifer's site is jenniferhayden.com, which is JenniferHayden.com. She's on Twitter and Instagram as Jen Hay Goddess, which is JenHay and the word goddess, and on Facebook as Jennifer Hayden Author. And we'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18, @gmail.com. You can find contact info at our sites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. And at that latter site, you can also find a link to the COVID-19 sessions, which has all of these daily podcasts with our past guests. And in case you're interested in how I do the remote setup, instead of the in-person episodes that I've done for the previous 360-something shows, I'm using Zencastr to record these. And that's ZENCASTR. So no final E. Just go to zencastr.com. You can see what the service is like. The pro service, which is what I'm using, is $20 a month, but my Patreon supporters more than cover it, especially since I'm not spending money anymore on parking, tolls, subways, coffee, etc. for all those in-person episodes. And I'm not spending all that time driving, which is a weird thing. I realize now how much time is spent in transit doing these shows. So once things get back to quote-unquote normal, we'll have to see how the in-person versus remote show balance works. Anyway, when I mention money, I am not asking you for any. I'm doing just fine with work, but there are a lot of people out there who are in need right now. There are a lot of food banks in need. If there are writers, artists, creative people, or otherwise who who could use a hand, go contribute through their Patreons, Kickstarters, GoFundMes, whatever. And if there are charities you can give to those. Don't give to me. So that's where we are. I'm Gil Roth. This is April 10th, 2020. It is Good Friday. So for my Christian listeners, hope you have a great Easter. And for everybody else, hope you have a great weekend. This is a bonus episode of my Virtual Memory Show podcast, and I thank you so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.